Evening to you. This is Drive Time on BBC London 94.9. What have we been talking about today? Certainly we continue our conversation about some of these high-profile criminal trials that have been put on hold today because hundreds of barristers and solicitors have gone out on strike quite literally, and it's about legal aid and changes to the legal aid bill. I suppose it's about reducing the amount that we are spending. We've also been talking about the Met Commissioner and indeed the police. The Met Commissioner says the review of the original police investigation into Stephen Lawrence's murder is devastating, calling yesterday the worst day of his career. We're taking your thoughts on that. And also we've been talking about level crossings in London and why there was an unreserved apology from the head of Network Rail. Let's talk to Louise in Bromley, shall we? Louise, good evening to you.
Good evening, Eddie. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks. You see, on one hand, we are being told that the legal aid bill was going up and up so fast, so much that lawyers were living a life of worry, and just like everything else, it had to be taken into control. And on the other hand, we hear that there may well be serious miscarriages of justice if there are cuts applied in the way they are planned. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
I totally understand that there needs to be cuts, and there does, obviously, in ways, but I just think that it's a totally wrong way. I mean, in my case, I'm talking about my mum getting legal aid. She was married to a very, very wealthy person. When they split after a long time, he was able to afford top barristers, etc., etc. She was abused quite badly, beat her up, all sorts of things, so he wasn't a nice character. And then when it came to court, he was able to afford everything. She couldn't. If it hadn't have been for legal aid, the CPS, etc., etc., which obviously they're going to be cut as well, it's not just legal aid we're talking about, she wouldn't have been able to. He was fighting for custody of two girls, and he would have won. And that is the honest. We're not just talking about high-profile crimes. It was talked about earlier. Things that are televised, etc., etc., and how much that costs. We're talking about normal people that would not be able to afford justice to be done, because justice wouldn't have been done, because everything that my mum said was twisted. Because barristers are very, very clever, as we all know, and things have changed. And if she wasn't able to have the legal counsel that she had, things would have been very, very different.
Louise, Leo McKinstry, he's a columnist for the Daily Mail and indeed the Express. He doesn't think that legal aid is necessary at all. Have a listen to this.
What I would like to see is actually to abolish all legal aid and instead to move to the system they have in America for a public defender, a court-appointed defender for someone, so that people do get representation in court. But I think at the minute it's a ludicrous system that doesn't provide any justice to the taxpayer at all.
No justice for the taxpayer, Louise?
I mean, I'm a taxpayer, always have been, since, I was old enough to work, and I believe that if somebody's entitled to that defence, then I'm happy for my taxes to go there.
Louise, thanks so much. Francis, how's legal aid worked for you?
Well, in my case, without the legal aid funding that I receive, I believe to this very day I would be in prison as a result had I not got it.
Explain what happened, if you can.
Well, what it was is a couple of years ago, there were some local kids to where I live causing problems with their antisocial behavior. One day I stood at my doorway and asked one particular boy to quieten down. His response was to walk up to my garden path and assault me. As a result, police were called, and I was the one that was arrested for it.
And just take us through what happened then. So you're presumably in a cell. You've been arrested. Were you charged?
Yes, I was charged with common assault. And what I find very strange was that even my neighbors who witnessed the whole thing, they all came forward to support my version of events. But on the day, the police wasn't interested. They just simply said to them, listen, go back into your house, we're not interested. All they wanted to do on that day was to arrest us.
In terms of what happened then, tell us how legal aid came into play.
Well, as a result, at the time, I was working as a bus operator. I wasn't able financially to afford private lawyers, so the only avenue I could have taken was going under the legal aid route. And I'm glad I've done so, because as I've stated previous, without that, I know to this very day I would be in prison.
What makes you think that you wouldn't be able to access justice in the way that you were then under new rules?
Well, back then, even when I was arrested, I tried to request certain evidence from the police to prove my innocence, of which the police had in their possession, but I was dismissed. And well, had it not been for the dogged determination of my solicitors, the Crown Prosecution Service would not have released the document.
Francis, thank you so much for talking to us. Bob Neal is MP for Bromley and Chislehurst, joins us now. Good evening to you, sir.
Good evening, hi.
For me, what's coming out is they're on strike today, and we've had a number of people who've come forward and said, look, Eddie, if it changes, we fear that we will not have access to justice in the way that we have, and there will be serious miscarriages of justice. Can you tell people that that is not so?
I don't believe that is so, because what we're talking about here is certainly a reduction in, as what you rightly say, has been an exponential growth in legal aid fees, which just isn't sustainable. But the key thing that we do throughout these reforms is ensure that people have access to a good quality lawyer. Now, the problem the barristers have got is that they're on strike over a particular role model around the fees that are paid to them as independent barristers. Equally, very often, much of the work is done by experienced solicitor advocates, and they have not come out on strike. They don't like every change that's being made, but I think they've been more realistic, and they said that they work with the government to make a new fee structure work.
Right.
There are going to be advocates available. May not always be a barrister, may not always be in the current form that you get, but someone in the position of those people, I have no reason to believe, will not have to access to a good lawyer if they really need it.
Well, what would have happened in the... I've just had Louise and then Francis tell me they fear under these new rules that they would have serious miscarriages of justice. They would not have had quite literally their day in court. What would have happened what would happen now in Francis' case?
Well, in Francis' case, if the gravity of the charge was such that he was at risk of a criminal offence, then he'd still be able to be considered for it. And the point that we're making is that those two folk you were just talking to, and I can understand, their concerns relate to eligibility. But what we're talking about here is a change to the amount of fees that are paid. That's got nothing to do with whether the individual client is the defendant.
Well, with all due respect, sir, it does count.
It's the remuneration of the lawyers.
Well, it does count if there isn't a lawyer to do it.
Well, and only if people come out on strike, and the point which I think is just really a bit silly, and the point that I'm making is there are competent solicitors who will be available to do this work, but I don't think when you've had a massive expansion in the number of barristers in particular, that the bar really can claim that the taxpayer should be not... It should be in effect subsidising the way in which they provide their service. Let
me stop you there, Bob.
Who need legal help.
Let me stop you, because the point was made by Louise that, we talk about this taxpayer, this term, and we throw it around. People who are victims are also taxpayers. I would imagine that lawyers and barristers are taxpayers too, so it involves all of us. I'll come back to you in a second. Let me just invite Nicola Hill to have her say. Nicola is the president of the London Criminal Court Solicitors Association. It's a silly strike, says Bob Neal. Do you agree, Nicola?
Absolutely not, and it seems to me that Bob hasn't fully understood what's going on today, because all the solicitor advocates are out on strike as well. So they're pretty fed up with what's been suggested, and they won't be stepping in to replace barristers.
You tell us what's happening today, because we are now confused. I've just had two callers who fear that justice will not be there for them under these new terms. Bob Neal, who's MP for Bromley and Chislehurst, says it will. If you need it, you will get justice. This is just an argument about how much people like you get paid.
Okay, it's absolutely not about how much we get paid, and that's why it's so important today that people understand that. What's actually going to happen as a result of these cuts is that solicitors' firms are going to go to their wall in their hundreds, and it's going to happen in a couple of months' time. It's not going to be next year or the year after. It's going to be really quite soon. And the danger then, of course, is that there are no talented solicitors around to represent people. Because of the extent of the cuts, firms are going to have to sack their expensive solicitors, and they're going to have to replace them with unqualified basically legal advisors.
Cuts in hospitals, cuts to firefighters, cuts to all sorts of bodies. Why should there not be cuts to solicitors, barristers and the like?
Because what we have been saying to the Lord Chancellor the whole way through is that these cuts are not necessary. We have provided him with economic evidence to show him that the cuts that he is after will be made naturally over time because of the fall in the crime rate. And so, you know, it's just completely unnecessary. What is necessary is a complete overhaul of the criminal justice system, because there is so much waste within it. And the one good thing he has done is say that he's going to have that review by Lord Justice Leveson, and hopefully he will have the ability to say this is where you can make savings. You know, waste in prison vans not arriving at court until 4 o'clock, waste in the CPS not having the right papers until after lunch, waste in interpreters turning up at court who don't speak the right language or have gone to the wrong court or have arrived at the wrong time. There is so much waste that can be made. So we say yes, there can be savings. No, doesn't need to be cuts. It's justice and the individuals that will suffer if this all actually happens. If he thinks it will.
I'm going to go back to Bob and give him the last word on this. You don't properly understand what we've been discussing today. That's the accusation, Bob.
Well, actually, I spent 25 years as practicing as a criminal lawyer before I came into Parliament. Most of that was doing legal aid work, so I promise you I understand, because it was my income too. And nobody likes to take it, but the real problem which Nicola hasn't dealt with, particularly at the bar, to a lesser degree amongst the solicitors, is that frankly there are too many barristers doing legal aid work. There are too many people chasing the amount of work that's available. The bar's expanded massively, and frankly, if there were fewer barristers concentrating, then you'd be more likely to make the amount of work go around in a sensible way.
Well, just one second, Bob. Before you cut people's jobs, surely you should cut. Nicola does have a point, and certainly I've been in, I've gone and had a look and sat, as you would expect that I would, and, you know, papers haven't arrived, things haven't done, things are adjourned, and it goes on and on. Surely that's what you need to tackle first.
Frank, I think we need to be doing both. And in fact, the Lord Chancellor has said that we are, as Nicola says, we're doing the Leveson review, and we're also looking at an awful lot of ways in which you could save money. For example, having hearings remotely so that people don't have to turn up to court and so on. But that's also not a reason for getting the best possible value out of legal aid. And the real problem really is this. When I started off at the bar, there were about 2,500 barristers doing that sort of work. I think in total the number of barristers has gone up to about 15,000. So you've really got too many people chasing the amount that's available. That's probably not fair on young barristers, but the bar isn't prepared to grapple with that fact.
Bob, we'll leave it there, and I appreciate your time. Bob Neal, the Conservative MP for Bromley and Chislehurst, former barrister himself, and Nicola Hill, President of the London Criminal Court Solicitors Association. You have the for and again.